The original Mafia was released in 2002 by the then Illusion Softworks, a studio that has since been bought out and is today known as 2K Czech. While I never played that title, I distinctly remember it being well received by audiences and critically acclaimed by reviewers. When the newly recreated Mafia Definitive Edition was announced, developed by Hangar 13, the same dev team behind Mafia 3, I was excited to finally be able to experience the life and crimes of Thomas Angelo in the Chicago-inspired Lost Heaven. Set during the midst of the Great Depression, Mafia Definitive is a retelling of Tommy's induction into and subsequent career within the Salieri crime family. While I normally like to structure my videos in a certain way, in this case I'm going to change the format up a bit. The reason for this change here is because I have very little to say in some areas, but an absolute ton to delve into within others. Mafia Definitive is not so much an open interactive world to explore and is instead a much more narrative focused and cinematic experience. Because of this, I'm splitting this title into 3 videos. This one, the first, will be the normal review I've done in the past. The second and third will be dedicated to Mafia Definitive's narrative and its characters. In the case of this video, there will be minimal spoilers, but there will be many more in the next 2. If you decide to pick this title up at the time of publishing this video, it costs about $40 American or euros to do so. Also on sale sometimes with pretty deep discounts. Once you buy it, there's no additional monetization within or DLC to consider. You pay one price and you receive one entire game. Mafia Definitive is old-fashioned like that. Because I didn't play the original Mafia, I'm not going to compare the two here. While I probably could justifiably do so by using other YouTube videos, I'd rather treat this as an original and complete title all on its own. That's mostly because, due to my understanding, this is such a drastic remake that it's almost a reimagining of the original, due to the massive jump in graphical technology and game design since the original title released. In a word, Mafia's presentation is excellent. The city of Lost Heaven is tremendously detailed with realistic and reflective pools of water, impressive ambient direct lighting, and a myriad of props and decorations that really help the city feel lived in. Unfortunately, that's all an illusion. It's very similar to the set dressing in TV shows and films in that you can't interact with it and it's all there for world building, but the illusion it conveys is impressive nonetheless. The vehicles, art direction, and even the title's music all combine to provide for an immersive and believable world in which to experience Tommy's story. Speaking of Tommy, many of the characters' performers here have been motion captured and scanned into the game using modern technologies, which means that, for the most part, the voice actors you're hearing and seeing are also lending their likenesses to the characters they're portraying. This makes for a convincing cinematic experience that stands well alongside its obvious inspirations such as Goodfellas and the Godfather films. There are some graphical glitches that will pop up from time to time and some screen tearing, but most of these issues have been ameliorated with patches that have come out in the last few months. There's also a kind of annoying momentary freeze that happens whenever you press pause, and it might sometimes scare you into thinking that your game is soft locked. But in my experience, after 3 or so seconds, the game continued without issue. The main campaign mode is comprised of chapters, with about 4 missions to complete for each. The missions are well paced and almost always feature some sort of new set piece or narrative hook to keep the player going. Almost all of them are fun and or memorable for the right reasons. Gameplay in Mafia Definitive is pretty straightforward, and the open world doesn't feature much variety, such as open world activities, extended narratives, or gameplay challenges. Aside from getting to wherever you're going via driving, you'll sometimes engage in fisticuffs and gunfights. Unfortunately, the melee combat absolutely sucks. It might not be so bad on a controller, but on a mouse and keyboard, there were multiple times where I just said screw it and whipped out my pistol and started shooting people in the head. That's much more enjoyable though, because while there aren't many firearms implemented here, most of them are very distinctive and are often overly specialized in what they do. I've seen a lot of criticism online for the weapons and combat of Mafia Definitive, and I don't quite understand it. Considering the weapons technology and manufacturing processes available during the 1930s, these firearms function as expected. They aren't super accurate like firearms are in many modern titles, but they also aren't supposed to be. In addition, from the gameplay footage I've seen, it seems a lot of players are pointing Tommy at enemies, rather than taking their time to target his foes and kill them with as few bullets as possible, as I tried to. Beyond the handguns, which are surprisingly effective in medium range, the most prevalent firearms will be the shotgun and the Thompson. The shotgun was my personal favorite because it hits like a truck being pulled by a comet.
Take down there! They're serious!
Blasting mobsters onto their backs with a full load of buckshot never got old for me. The period iconic Thompson Tommy gun is here, and while it isn't bad, it supports that kind of spray and pray playstyle that I don't personally care for. When I did choose to use it, I used smaller bursts of automatic fire to pepper my foes until they succumbed to those bullets.
Come on, we gotta push up! Get out! Come on, we gotta get Sergio out! He went out the back! Get in cover!
There's also a bolt-action rifle, and every time I killed someone with it, I felt a sense of finality with the kill, but also a tinge of regret, as it seemed overkill somehow. I think it's because when I did use it, I was usually killing cops, and the red mist from those headshots seemed more brutal than others for some reason that I still can't specify.
I see it!
There's also a chance with each non-headshot kill of your foes for them to die more slowly. They'll sometimes beg for their lives, cry for their families, express regret at their fate, or just writhe in pain until they expire. I found this impactful and provocative as it imbues the combat with a very real sense of consequence for the characters involved.
Move up his side! Get me! Kill him! They're coming for you!
The enemies in this game don't just feel like NPCs with set patrols and AI pathing, even though they very much are. In many ways, no doubt in part due to excellent graphical presentation, animation set, and immersive voice acting, they often felt like real people.
You got him! Get on it before I'm dead!
Having said that, I never felt any sort of negative emotional response for killing them. While they may draw their dying breaths in a sympathetic and sometimes even pathetic fashion, while alive, these dudes waste no time or energy in trying to gun your ass down. While the AI isn't brilliant, they sometimes make a surprisingly effective effort to coordinate their movements and using different types of weapons against you. However, at higher difficulties, they do feel rather unbalanced and sometimes cheap due to their increased damage and unrealistic accuracy. Much more often than combat, though, you'll find yourself simply driving around the city. Trips are usually accompanied by some sort of narrative device that usually takes the form of a cutscene, a relevant, often parallel broadcast on the radio, and or some sort of expositional dialogue between characters. While some have been rather critical of some of Mafia Definitiv's admittedly basic combat and traversal systems, I found them to be simple, straightforward, and functional in such a way that they weren't frustrating. My biggest complaint comes with the ridiculously accurate enemy fire that, especially in later missions and at higher difficulties, sent me to a restart screen time and time again.
Right there! You enjoying your meal? What happened? Special fella? Get your hat behind something! Got a hit! You're taking fire! Please! Yeah! They got Tommy! Taking cover! This guy!
As for the story, the basic gist is that you play as Thomas Angelo, an Italian-American immigrant who becomes a mobster for an Italian organized crime family and works his way up the organization over about a decade. As I said at the beginning of the video, I'm going to separate my thoughts on the story because the narrative really is the main focus here. For now, I'll say that it features a likable cast of characters, excellent acting and voice work, and an engaging and memorable narrative. I don't think I'll hold on to every single story beat, character, or mission here, but there are some highlights here I don't think I'll ever forget. I'm very biased here because my absolute favorite genre of media is anything and everything related to organized crime and banditry, but even without that bias, I believe Mafia Definitive is a wonderfully realized project. Gameplay can be somewhat frustrating at times, but if you do as I did and take it slowly and really take in the details of the world and the narrative here, this title is a purchase well worth its asking price, on sale or no. I know that this re-release was less universally loved by those who played the original, and if you also feel that way, I'd love to hear why in the comments. If you haven't played Mafia Definitive yet and are thinking of picking up, feel free to ask me anything down below or let me know if this was helpful in aiding your decision to do so. Finally, if you want to see more reviews and or videos from me in the future, please check out some of my other videos and, of course, subscribe. Now that this pretty basic review is concluded, in the next video I'll talk about the story, and fair warning, it's going to be full of spoilers for pretty much every part of it. If you decide to join me for it, I hope you enjoy the write-up and the video. Thank you for watching.
Then I'm sorry I wasted your time. And mine. I gotta get out of town. Look, Tom,